Hi there, it's Fred and Fred. Thanks for tuning in to Guitar Media, and welcome to Guitar Media's Marshall Major Cascade mod video. We're here today to take a look at this 1971 Marshall Major running at 90 volts. Okay, safety first. The first thing we want to do is discharge the capacitors or check the capacitors here with a meter and make sure that there's no voltage inside the amp, because this amp could potentially have 630 volts, which would obviously be very dangerous. Another thing I highly recommend is checking your fuses and make sure that you have the proper fuses. I'm running a 5 amp and a 0.5 amp, so a half amp fuse for my HT fuse and then a 5 amp fuse for my power fuse, which has so far worked out for me just fine. Now I just sort of want to go over the reason why we're running this amp at 90 volts on a Variac. So with such high plate voltages, what I actually did is I went online and I bought a set of KT120 output tubes, because I thought, oh, this is a great idea. You know, these tubes can handle, I don't know, 600 or 800 volts on the plates, and we shouldn't have a problem with output tube arcing. And so I put them in the amp and biased them and got them up and running. Well, it turns out I absolutely did have a problem, and I had an arc in one of the tubes, and I blew the 5 amp main fuse, which is very scary. But fortunately, I was able to return the tubes on eBay. I just so happened to have a vintage set of RCA 6550s laying around, and I got them in the amp and got it up and running. And 90 volts on the Variac is just a safe zone for these 6550s to be running, so we don't have to worry about arcs in the output tubes or blowing fuses. So the next thing you're going to want to do is run through the amp and check all the resistor specifications and capacitor specifications to make sure that they're consistent with other Marshall Major amps, and basically make sure that the circuit is a stock circuit, and if it does have any existing mods, you want to bring it back to stock original before we perform these mods that we're going to perform. That way the amplifier can sound the way that it's supposed to sound. And as you can see here, we've actually replaced the output coupling capacitors, and we've moved them to the inside of the amp. And really, if you can't see the color bands on the resistors, what you can do is just take a meter and check the resistance and cross-reference it with the schematic or several other amps online. Okay, so this is where you're going to want to start. What we have here is, on this side, this is actually the mixer stage of the amplifier right here. And so what you have here is you have the bright volume of volume 2 coming into this leg, and it actually falls over a 470K resistor and this dog bone, which is a bright capacitor, and that is the bright volume coming in the mixer stage. And then what we have is the normal volume right here coming in, which is channel 1, I believe, and it comes into this terminal here, and then it follows over a 470K resistor into the mixer stage. So this is actually where we disconnect the 470K resistor here from the regular terminal connection when it's stock, and then we add this ground wire. You can see this green ground wire we've added here to the back of volume 1, or the bass channel. And what this ground wire does is it actually makes the amplifier, it tricks the amplifier, and it makes it think that the 470K resistor is still connected to the pot like it normally would be. And the reason why is because if you have the volume turned all the way down, it normally sends this 470K to ground, and that's exactly what we've done with this green wire. Now, typically this wire would actually be connected to the output tab or terminal on volume 1 or the bass channel. We disconnected this wire from the output tab here and connected it here. And the reason why we've done that is just in case we ever want to unmodify the amp, all we have to do is just disconnect it and then reconnect it. But now that you have the volume wire disconnected, then you just simply add a 470K to the output tab on the normal channel, or excuse me, the bass channel. And I believe it's a 53K as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump over here into the input of the bright channel, or channel 2. And so this is where the high and low sensitivity inputs come into the bright channel. And what this has done now is effectively cascaded channel 1 into the input of channel 2 and effectively disconnected channel 1 from the mixer stage. anyways, it looks like I got channel 1 and volume 2 mixed up in the breakdown of the amplifier. But anyways, it was clear to see which one was which. And so when we play this amplifier without the modification, we actually remove this jumper cable and we plug straight into input 1. And we run all the controls on 10. So, you know, presence on 10, bass on 10, middle on 10, treble on 10, volume 1 on 10. And that's volume 1 in this amplifier, even with the Cascade mod, is completely stock original. So this is the unmodded sound clips. This is how we do the unmodded sound clips. And then we go for the Cascade mod, where we cascade volume 2 or channel 2 into channel 1. I actually use this jumper cable. And so what this jumper cable does is it effectively lifts certain resistors from ground, because these inputs have a 1 meg, and there's also a 56K on the card. But anyways, without this jumper, it sounds a little bit too bright, and it's not quite the gain that we're looking for. So once we get the jumper in, this is how we play it. And we've got volume 2, we've got it maybe on 6 or 1 or 2 o'clock here. So we don't turn it all the way up. And we found that if you do turn it all the way up on 10, we did experience an oscillation, and it actually was an unwanted tremolo effect. And we could have taken other measures by changing capacitors to avoid this, or resistors, but we love how the amplifier sounds stock, and we did not want to further modify it, because by doing it this way, of course we're never going to turn it all the way up, so we don't have to worry, we still get basically absolutely the unmodified major sound with just more gain. So it would be kind of like just boosting the volume 1 with like a boost pedal, or maybe an EQ or whatever you would use to boost it. But now, conveniently, we're boosting it with the other side of preamp valve 1, because each tube has 2 gain stages. So now we're using gain stage volume 2 to drive gain stage volume 1. So I just want to do a quick rundown of our speaker configuration, and you can see this amplifier has 4 inputs, and we've got 4 jacks connected to the speaker jack terminals here. And what we have here is 4 16 ohm loads. So our 4 16 ohm loads equals the total 4 ohm load. And so on this first jack, we've got our Marshall 1980, roughly model 1982 B cab, and that's the G1280s. And on this next jack, we've got this KMD 412, and it's got 4 G12M 75 watt Celestions, and that totals 16 ohms. The other cab totals 16 ohms. On this next jack, we actually are running to a 412 over here, and it's the one behind the chair on the bottom there. And in that 412, we have a couple of made in England Celestion vintage 30s, and they're 8 ohm drivers. But those 2 8 ohm drivers actually equal 16 ohms. So that's another 16 ohm load. And then over here, this last jack terminal, you see we have a wiring harness. And so what this wiring harness does is it creates let's see, it's not parallel, so it creates a series. And so basically what that's doing is it's taking two 8 ohm loads. So we've got two 8 ohm loads here. So this is one is the G12H Celestion T1217s. Now that's two 16 ohm drivers, and that is in parallel. And so that goes down to 8 ohms. And then we've got two more creambacks in that cabinet. So that makes that cabinet a split 412. So two vintage 30s and then two creambacks. And those two creambacks are 16 ohms, and that actually is in parallel to 8 ohms. So these two 8 ohm loads are now in series on our wiring harness jack, and that creates our final 16 ohm load here on the back of the amplifier. And this configuration has allowed us to really control the power and the output of the amplifier, so we're getting a nice response. As you can see, we're playing the 412 behind the chair, so now we're getting a really nice response. The guitar, when we want the sustain and the feedback, we get it instantly. Also, we're not blowing our eardrums out by running any of these speakers. And then these speakers over here that are elevated, they shoot into the room and create a wonderful room reverb sound. And these are actually the speakers we're miking. You can see the SM57 here. If you'd like to support the channel or see more of our videos, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and check our channel for our latest videos.